Everyone. Welcome to the state of our workforce. Where are we now? Each month, we take a deeper dive into the innovative and effective workforce solutions that the National Fund Network is adopting to address local challenges across our country. My name is Michelle Wilson. I am the Director of Evaluation Learning at the National Fund. And I am super excited to have who I believe is like a rock star in the workforce world, Linda Dworak, Director of the Baltimore Workforce Funders Collaborative, joining us today. That was a mouthful. Good morning, Linda. How are you?
Good morning, Michelle. I am well. How are you on this beautiful day?
I know. Happy spring. So this is good. I was really excited that you were our guests for today's conversation. You guys have been working on some stuff. You've been in the trenches doing some work on your strategic framework, and I am really excited to talk to you about that today. Are you ready to get started?
I am ready to share what we're working on.
So, you guys back in 2021, like just like mid, started digging into your new strategic, building out a new strategic framework. So, I'm curious. Um, Given the time point when you started this, what felt urgent about what you guys were about to take on, and what, if anything, did you want to change about the strategic framework compared to maybe previous times that you've done this?
Yeah. So our Workforce Funders Collaborative has been around for a long time. Kind of got started kind of informally around 2006. So it's been a long time. But by the time we were in the midst of the pandemic, we had a larger table of funders. We are a funders collaborative, so most of our members our members are funders of workforce development, both public and private in Baltimore. And we were really starting to think about the impact of our work and coming to an understanding that traditional workforce development, although very important, activities like job placement, job training and placement, very important, but it alone can't have significant impact underlying causes of racial inequities in our community, the underlying kind of factors that keep our labor market such that people who are entry-level workers and people of color have been kind of routinely undervalued, segregated into lower wage, low opportunity jobs. And so we wanted to kind of look more deeply both at what we were doing to address those problems, but also how we were doing them as a group of funders.
So, so that's, the systems change, just like, it's just like bubbles to the top when I hear what you're talking about as well too. And so um, incorporating that into a strategic framework, I imagine requires lots of deep thinking and in terms of how you go about doing these kinds of work. So I'm curious about your approach to that, and then just what bubbled up from that. Like, where did you land?
Yeah, I mean, we started really looking for a facilitator that was coming to us with a deep racial equity framework, understanding, and way of operating. And we had a lot of really hard conversations at our table. As I mentioned, we weren't just talking about what we would do, what our strategies would be, but how we as a group of public and private funders around the table, how we operate with regard to how funding decisions are made, how the group operated within its own dynamics of the people at the table who all had sort of diverse backgrounds and levels of power. What we ended up with, I mean, part of what we did actually was we looked at the National Funds framework, which was extremely helpful to us. And eventually, through a series of sometimes really uncomfortable, difficult conversations, about who we are, what we want to do together, we came up with three primary buckets of work. One of them is creating more equitable access to good jobs. And the second is increasing the number of good jobs. And the third is supporting equitable and impactful workforce funder practice. So Would be good if I told you a little bit about those.
Yeah, and I think we're going in the same direction because I want to give you space to really talk about your strategic operating principles, which I think are really critical. So I want to create enough space for you to talk about that with just enough meat to like whet people's appetite about what you guys are doing. So yes, you go.
Yeah. Okay. So just in terms of those three buckets, just to clarify, like the first one is creating access to good jobs, equitable access to good jobs, and like in that bucket, we're putting things like job training and supportive services and policies that policy and framework around what are the barriers to helping individuals or individuals to achieving in the workforce space. And then the second one was about creating more good jobs. So that's where we're really framing that just helping or providing people the support to get training or upgrade skills isn't enough if there aren't good jobs in your community. And so we have to work in that space also to help make more jobs available that are good. And that might be about changing the practices of existing employers or trying to work with our workforce, our economic development folks to think more broadly about how they good businesses. And the third was about our own funder practices. So in funding, the funding landscape, there's a whole body of work around trust-based philanthropy. So looking at new ways of trusting our community. So in terms of our strategic, what I'm really proud about is we have a set of strategic operating principles that our group agreed on, and they're available on our website. But I'll just briefly share kind of what they are about. So there was 6 of them. The first is really around racial equity. And recognizing that our work has to be about dismantling racism, bias, and anti-Blackness specifically. The second is around using an asset framework for how we talk about, and you see me maybe stumbling sometimes in my language because it's like something we have to retrain our brains to do, is to talk about the people in our community from a framework of their assets, their strengths, their aspirations, and not from language of deficit. And so this is like a retraining our own brains to do this. The third is about employers being an essential partner in our work. However, employers also, they could be they're our partner, but also they've got to change practices too if we're going to make this work. And then the next one is using a systems approach. So thinking globally about our system, our ecosystem, and then and developing strategies that look at the whole system. 2 more. One is that we have partners in our community who are the nonprofits who do a lot of the work. And sometimes funders have to be reminded that these are our partners and we love and respect them and we want to listen to them and really, challenge our power dynamics in a way that elevates their voice. And last but not least is a principle that all of this work can't be done without the voice and perspectives of adults and youth in our community who are the job seekers or the workers in the entry-level jobs.
So what I love about all of this, and it feels really good, I get chills when I hear what you're talking about. So if I'm recapping, you're talking about hard conversations, equity, trust relationships and funding practices, employer change, systems approach, partnering, worker voice, power dynamics, all the things that we talk about so much and why it's so important to our work. And it's also hearing you talk about this is nice because I feel we do at the National Fund and what you're doing at the Funder Collaborative on the ground, we're mirrors of one another, right? So this is important to our work, and it's important to you guys, and that really does speak to the power of our network. So I have deep appreciation for the work that you're doing in the field on that. So it's that using some of the tools, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have deep appreciation for the
We love each other.
We have to. I mean, I really think that it was helpful to us to be able to pull from the work that the National Fund did. 2 of those 3 buckets that I said really are very straight out of National Fund's equity framework, and around making good job, access to good jobs, and then more good jobs. Yeah, I mean, we learn from each other, and that's really what's, the strength of this network. I'm always learning from our other colleagues and other collaboratives around the country about what they're doing and drawing great ideas from them.
So, and for those of you who don't know about Baltimore's role in the National Fund, like I've always called you one of the OGs, like because you guys have been here.
He's an old girl.
We're both that, but that's not that. But like, but OGs in terms of how long you've been in the network, and so seeing the work you guys do is really, really important. So as we move forward here, I'm looking at the time here, but one of the things that I want to just leave on, I think about is just like, now that you've done all of this really, 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 really important work, the next hard part is the implementation piece, right? And so we talked about that briefly about like, oh, so now we've got to go out and really make all of this happen. And so what makes you most excited about that? And what makes you most nervous?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about it because I actually really love the framework we put together. I'm nervous about it because I in my role as a facilitator or director of a funder collaborative, I have a bunch of funders around the table, and they each have their own structures, strategies, decision-making processes, and it's not something I directly have control over, right? So the best I can kind of do as a funder collaborative lead is to try to bring people together around this narrative, around this framework, and hopefully by being out there and messaging around the framework, we can start to really help facilitate our group of funders and our community kind of swimming together in the right direction. I'm really excited about a new initiative we have called Community Conversations, where yeah. So I mean, one thing we decided was we weren't having enough direct and honest communication with the providers of workforce development, like nonprofit leaders or nonprofit, not just the leaders, but the staff and of nonprofits across our community. So we've created this group that's being led by partners in the community who are helping us to design what it means to have a community conversation. And so we've had a couple of really, really nice planning meetings where there's just been a lot of honest sharing and conversation between funders and practitioners. And so we're moving that forward. I'm really excited about our commitment to worker voice, but I'll tell you, Michelle, like, I don't really know how we're going to do it yet. So that's also my concern. Like, is this going to happen? How are we going to do it? And that's like a big space where we still have a lot to learn, is how are we as a funder collaborative going to help incorporate worker voice that we do?
Well, I have deep faith in you, mostly because of the intentionality that went into the work, and I know how important it is to you all. And so I am getting a cue to wrap up here. But I really appreciate your transparency about what's happening and what got you here and where you're going. And really important for people to hear the realness of the work, right? And not hide behind any like firewalls of like, it's all great, it's all rosy. No, this is tough work, right? Yeah. So thank you, Linda, for joining me today. Be sure to join us next month as we continue to have conversations about the state of our workforce.